Hi there everyone, I haven't made these videos in a very long time, but I feel desperately this is a topic that needs to be talked about because we need to think, what is life going to be like in the 2030s in the UK with its own political system? I mean, for years in the past, it's always been a two-party system. It's always been the Conservatives versus Labour, and the Conservatives for the past 50 years or so had the longest reign of in power. I mean, we've got that with the Thatcher years, we've had that during the coalition and the recent Conservative years, not to mention Winston Churchill. However, Labour has always been very, very short, always one term, until Tony Blair came into office in 1997. Then he was the only Labour Prime Minister who was in power the longest. Now in these times, we need to think heavily about what life is going to be like in the future in 2030 and beyond, especially in the UK's political spectrum, because there seems to be a large cry for extremism, and two parties seem to come up with this. Both of them have valid points to begin with, which is immigration versus the cost of living crisis. Now with UK Reform, which is more of a far right, they're a splinter group from the Conservatives for the major strong far right people. Immigration has always been a problem, and we've seen it in large cities such as London, Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester, all those places, big cities. And there seems to be a massive issue with that, with crime and poverty and so forth, but mostly with crime and abuse and so forth. Not to mention the little boats keep crossing the English Channel, looking for asylum, looking for benefits and so forth. Now, with the other side, which is Your Party, run by a certain Jeremy Corbyn. At the moment it's called Your Party, but I don't know what they're going to be called in years to come because they even haven't figured out a proper name for themselves yet. For them, it's the cost of living crisis. So for them, it's always about food, how much that's gone up, inflation's gone up, cost of fuel is going up, cost of bread and so forth, and the welfare state keeps being in crisis, and their focus is primarily on that. However, with them, also their other agenda, especially for the woke as well, which is Gaza, and their main focus is not for the people of the UK, but for the people of Gaza, and the mass so-called genocide, alleged genocide. Now, both of these parties do have valid points, which is immigration versus cost of living crisis, but they do have two major faults. One of them is obviously the party leader, their image, and who they are and what they stand for and what they represent is not actually true. The second is their supporters and what they really think, and it doesn't compare or equal to what the leaders are saying, or it's the true voices of what their leaders are in fact saying. So we'll look at UK Reform to begin with, and with them it's purely immigration, the crimes with it, like I said before, and their thing with like the little boats and how much of them keeps coming in versus how many people are being deported. How many of them are coming in is in the thousands, depending on which media station you're looking at. Some people will say it's a few thousands per week. Some people are saying it's at least 500,000 people per week, depending on, again, which media you're looking at. And how many of them are deported? The answer is none at all. Now, the reason why these immigrants, or the small boats that keep coming in, they're all caused by illegal gangs who are exploiting these people to come across. The vast majority of them, it's only a small tiny minority came from war-torn countries. The vast majority don't. They live in peaceful countries, just their quality of life and their quality of living is a lot worse than ours. But when they come here, the crimes keep going up, and they go to these like hotels, luxury hotels like in London and Chelsea, Canary Wharf and so forth, and they're living the life of Riley, paid by, of course, us, the British taxpayer, which is a massive, massive red flag, and it's obviously a vote loser. However, their leader, who thinks he represents the working class people, is in fact very privileged, spoilt from a rich upper class society, and is a banker. But having a pint in your hand and talking like you're Les Dawson makes it up for it, apparently, and saying Les Dawson quotes and jokes and so forth makes it okay, which it clearly doesn't, because they're not funny. Les Dawson was not really a good comedian. But that is Nigel Farage for you. That's what he represents. And his supporters believe full-heartedly that their view is the right way to do it, not only on deportation, which a lot of them do need to be deported, do need to be kicked out for huge crimes, but to prevent the small boats, they expect the Royal Navy to be out on patrol, like on a bounty hunting operation across the English Channel. That's partly their point of view and their ideas, including boycotting the lifeboats, or the RNLI, banning them from rescuing people and so forth, which they cannot do because that goes against maritime international law. However, then you've got the other side, which is your party, which again is by a leader who is out of touch with the working class people, supports the Champagne Socialists, trade unions, but mostly Champagne Socialists because he hates the working class people. He absolutely cannot stand them. And their views are simple for the university students is raise taxes, just purely raise taxes. However, here's the thing. The people who do not pay the taxes and actually get away with loopholes and things are in fact the rich oligarchs and also the Middle Eastern war criminals and warlords. All of them are luxury houses, literally only a few minutes walk from Buckingham Palace. That is a huge red flag in itself. But they do not touch them. Our own government will not even seize their assets. Even over the war in Ukraine, the Russian oligarchs in London are still not being paid, not paying their taxes, not paying their due, and still not had their assets seized. That is millions upon millions of pounds, which could be better off spent in our infrastructure, in our healthcare, in our education and defence. However, that's the side that the Your Move party will not do. They have no intention of that whatsoever, just taxing the hard-working, upper-class rich people to the point of they're going to simply say, screw it, we're leaving the country, we're taking all of our assets with us, we're taking our businesses out into Europe and do better in Europe, making the country much more poorer, which also brings jobs or unemployment to a record high. Again, not good. I'm not going for the Liz Truss economic policy because that is just atrocious and it's obvious it's not going to work. It's never going to work. And we've proven it because the lettuce collapsed. She did such a bad job. But yet her ideals are very Trump ideology, which is more of a far right situation. But the Corbyn lots even want to make a country safe again, but have no actual policies, no clear messages of how to make it safer. They're talking about supporting Gaza, supporting money and assets to obviously the Gazan government, which happens to be a terrorist organisation. This is not new because Corbyn does have a soft spot in the 80s to the IRA, and he's always supported them against British armed forces. He will even, no doubt, and a lot of his supporters would support this, is abolish the RAF, the Navy and the Air Force and turn it into a simple coastal defence system, which is poorly maintained, poorly manned and equipped. Literally none at all. And talking about this peace and prosperity and how our current Prime Minister is a warmonger. Our current Prime Minister is no worse than Tony Blair. What Tony Blair did in his years with Iraq was atrocious, and that's not how you do a war, because he was misinformed, lack of intelligence, lack of equipment, and lack of preparation, and just no clear guidelines. There was no clear of anything. It was in the military terms, it would be known as a clusterfuck. It would be just simply that. However, Corbyn, your party will just get rid of everything that's like defence and things like that. So we'd be basically open for anybody to come in and be attacked and so forth. That's essentially their view. So going back to the original topic, which is immigration versus cost of living crisis, we are now at the stage of two extreme parties, and that's the scary thing. 2030 onwards could be the far right with their huge thing on anti-immigration, vast mass deportation. Even the ones that have a right to be here and do work and do pay for society, they want them all out. Go back to the days of British Empire, so long as Britain is one type of people. However, you've got woke, the Corbyn supporters, and your party, and the other one by 2030, which will be so extreme that Britain will be anti-Semitic, not safe to live in for anyone who is Israeli or from Israel, who is clearly just, their healthcare, for example, would be anyone who's a member of a trade union and a your party member. That's it. Everyone else, no, you pay your way. Unless you're those two things. You have to be those two things to get universal healthcare. And again, that is extreme. And do you want a future which will be like Farage versus Corbyn? Does anybody want that as their future? As that's your option? Nuance is dead, or it is dying, and it needs help, it needs support. This country does need support. It needs growth, it needs innovation, it needs togetherness, it needs common sense and decency and common courtesy. We've done it before. We've done it during our darkest days in the Blitz. We've done it in 2012 with the Olympics. We worked together to go through it and make the country great and fantastic. We've even done it when London and even when Manchester were attacked by terrorist bombings and terrorist attacks. We came together as a people. But the Conservatives, I've noticed, are a dying breed. Their time is over. They're in like a political suicide. They need to rethink, regroup, and rethink what they've done in the past 14 years to get better. And they've got a lot to work on. They've got a lot of answers and a lot to work on. And UKIP is just really, really loud. And then you've got Labour on the other side, on your far left. Sorry, this is opposite on the camera, but on your far left, the Labour Party is also crumbling as well, especially with his whole benefits for the 2 children family system. And they're being split up by the Champagne Socialists, or your party, also by the Islamic community, who doesn't feel support of Labour anymore because Labour wants to support Israel, not them, not Gaza or Hamas. So the Islamic voting will go off to George Galloway, which again is even worse, or is just as bad. And here's the thing I don't get. Why would anyone support Hamas and their atrocities towards women, towards the LGBT, human rights policies? Hamas has none of that. It's got no concept and doesn't believe in it. Israel's Prime Minister has a lot to answer for. He has got checkered past, I grant you with that. And the way the war is going is pretty bad. He has a lot to answer for. However, Israel does have rights for women, freedom to vote, supports the LGBT. Their drag queens are amazing. You know, they're in Eurovision with drag queens and they're amazing performers. That just shows you how better Israel is on development on that issue in the entire Middle East in comparison. And the place just needs, you know, that's what we're looking at here, that we are in a state of a crisis in this country by 2030, and it will get a lot worse, sadly, and I hope it doesn't, because we do need to work together. We do need to use camaraderie, common sense, and courtesy. Just stand together, work as a team, be a nation together, and we can make this right. And we need tighter controls on immigration. There's no question about it. It's gone out of control, especially with all the countries they go through. France is safe, Italy's safe, Germany's safe, Spain's safe. All those countries are safe, but the more of this wave that we're getting of immigration versus deportation, which is ironic, it is getting worse. And the only person who did the most deportation in recent history happens to be Tony Blair, which was obviously Labour. And that's something to think about. That really is. We need to work together. We need to make this country great again. Our healthcare is not great and it needs reform. Our defence does need to be worked on, because Britain is the only country in Europe who does have a higher percentage of GDP on defence. However, Keir Starmer's dream of producing a submarine every 18 months sounds like something out of Command and Conquer, the old video games, which I used to play myself, which I enjoyed. But it sounds crazy because we do not have that infrastructure, but we need the infrastructure. We need to create jobs. We need to create more apprenticeships. We need a bigger, more high-tech navy. We need a military force that has common sense. Listen to the troops, listen to the sailors, listen to the admirals. They will tell you what they need, because Europe is going downhill. The Middle East is going downhill. There is still crisis in Africa, and our GDP budget on defence spending is low, and it's still low. The Americans can't help us out forever because they've got their own problems. They have their own problems, again, with the war on woke versus cost of living crisis in America, plus China, plus the Pacific. They have that problem as well. That's, all on them. So we need to work together. We need to make things better. Us, the middle ground people, do not want to see in a world which is your only options on the TV, on the news, will be vote for Nigel Farage or Jeremy Corbyn or one of his supporters. We don't want that, because there's no nuance, there is no fairness, there's no balance, and they're supported by media who have no concept of impartiality. Things like Talk, things like GDB News, things like Owen Jones, independent reporters, and all of those other sides, they have no bearing whatsoever what is factual. It's all political view. It's all scaremongering, and it's all full of false information. And that's damaging for everyone, both mentally and physically, and it doesn't do our country any good as well, both economically, socially, and and everything else in between. So we really need to think hard, people, we really do. What will our political spectrum will be like by the year 2030 onwards? I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry I was rambling for too long, but the word needs to get out. Anyway, take care. All the best to you. Bye.